Okay, so I'm back again with the first month $5 quilt. This is the cutting video on everything you need to know about cutting the block. Okay, first of all, this year, because we're not able to meet as well, you will have two things in your kit along with the fabric. One of them will be the instruction sheet, which looks like this, and then one I've done a separate cutting sheet that looks like this. Now, what you should be excited about this year is that if you look, we have color 1, which is right here. There's a little square to show you which fabric it is for each of the different groups, and then one line by line what you have to cut. But then over here is a diagram of how you're going to get those pieces out of that piece of fabric, and you'll have that for all of the fabrics. Now, this program has 6 fabrics in this block, and many of the blocks are going to have 5 or 6 fabrics. So the pieces obviously are a little smaller when you have that many fabrics, and there's a lot more to. There's a little bit more to cut. So it's important to know what fabric you're cutting before you get down, and that you kind of study how the pieces work and to the diagram. These are the pieces. This is the diagram, so you know what it's about. Before we start to cut, we're going to take our pieces and we're going to pre-shrink them. And the way I like to pre-shrink mine, these are too small. You cannot put them in the washing machine, so please don't do that and dry them. What we're going to do is we're going to spritz them with some water and let the water soak in a little bit. And then we're going to press them with a hot iron, and that's going to draw them back up and shrink them. So I'm just going to show you really quickly with this piece. I'm going to give it a quick spritz as she catches up. I'm going to give it a second, and then I'm going to take my iron, and this, I'm just going to keep going back and forth, and you'll see it's already, you can see it drying in. Drying it and making sure it's good and dry. I used Best Press. Now, I usually at home will do water first and then go back with the Best Press. Best Press is a sizing product that gives it some stiffness, and that's really good so that as you work with the fabric, it doesn't stretch. It has some crispness to it. So that's all there is to pre-shrinking, and you do that with all of your pieces. Okay? Now, to cut, we're going to cut fabric number 1. So you want to check on the instruction sheet, and I always do this, I throw things around. There is a 8-inch going this way and 7-inch going this way. So that way you'll know which way to lay this on your cutting mat, okay? So if the 8-inch is going up and down and the 7 going this way, you can see this is rectangular, so I know how to put it down. Now, in order to make my first cut, I need to get what we call a clean edge. I need to have a nice straight edge. So we're gonna, what I call, clean cut the first edge. So doing that, I'm going to take my rotary ruler, on my mat, and I'm going to take my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to put this down, and I'm just going to take this and cut one strip off of here, real tiny, and that gives me a nice clean edge. Notice I'm not using the lines on my mat, I'm just using the lines on my ruler. Now, when you look, we recommend Creative Grid rulers just because they have all the things, you know, that are the dots that prevent it from sliding, and they're just really easy to read. When I measure from the side with the white dots over, I'm getting full inches. When I measure from the black dots over, and you can see I'm getting the 1/2 inch because they've added the extra 1/2 inch here. So when you look at cutting instructions number 1, I have to cut 4 1.5 inch strips to start. So that's gonna be this line right here, 1.5. So I'm gonna flip this over. I have put my nice clean cut edge here, and I'm gonna lay my 1.5 inch line there so that it's the full length and it's nice and straight. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut strip 1. I'm going to line it up again. And I'm going to cut strip 2. And I'm going to do that 2 more times. Strip 3. and then one more time, strip 4. If you can't keep it straight, then you can always clean cut it again. Now, good rotary habits. When I'm done, close my blade before I put it down so you don't knock it off and cut your foot or toe off. Now, the first 2 pieces in the cutting instructions says I need to cut it 2 3.5-inch rectangles off of here. So I'm going to stack these like this, put them down. I will use the line to make sure it's straight. Then I'm going to take and this very strip set, and again I'm going to clean cut this end again. But when I do that, I make sure that the line on my ruler is going all the way across so that I'm square. Now I have to flip this around because I'm right-handed, and I'm going to measure over to the 3.5-inch line. Remember, I'm on the black side, so this is the half, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to, again, put my straight line here, I'm nice and straight. I'm going to cut 1 3.5-inch, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the second 3.5-inch, which now I have 4.5, or 4 3.5 by 1.5. Okay, so the next instruction is to cut a 1.5 by 7. Now this is going to be strip piece, so you really don't have to cut it down to 7, and you don't need to clean cut the edge. I'll go ahead and cut it at 7. Just do that real quick on the mat, and I'm going to put it over here next to the sewing machine so I can show you how to strip piece. And then the last piece, we're going to cut a 1.5 by 4. So again, I do need to clean cut the edge, and then I'm going to flip it over, and this time it's a full number, so I'm coming from the white side. I'm lining up my cut edges on the lines, and there's my 4-inch piece, and I'm going to set this up here. And then I need 2 1.5-inch squares. So if you have a little square ruler, that works great. Otherwise, just find your 1.5, do 1.5, 1.5. There's 1, and then I'm going to cut the second one. 1.5 by 1.5. There's 2. Okay. So that is just color number 1. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more colors to go. I'm not going to make and sit here and cut the whole thing, but that you've got the general idea. I would take all my pieces and line them up in the order that I cut them. And there's my gray, and that way you'll know where they are and what size they are when you need to cut them or grab them. Okay. The only thing I do want to point out here that's a little bit of it's not hard. Color light number 2 and light number 3 are real easy. You're just going to cut 4 1.5 by 3.5. The little gotcha here on print number 1 is that you're going to cut 3 1.5-inch strips. These you're going to cut a 1.5 by 3.5, and this one is a 1.5 by 2.5. Okay, because it'll throw you. You'll cut the 3.5 and think you need another 3.5, and you don't have enough fabric. You need a 2.5. Okay, and then you have the rest of them. You work your way down. But the good news is everything is cut at 1.5 first, so that's easy to remember. And then you just need to cut in your individual pieces. And you remember, don't go completely by the diagram. Read your directions here too. So that's your cutting. Okay. Any other hints and tips? Just when we talk about things that you're going to need for the program, you notice that I was using this nice straight creative grid ruler that is 6 by 12.5. Because all our pieces this year are going to be relatively small, you're probably going to want a smaller straight ruler. Normally we work with this, which is a great big one. This is a little hard when you're cutting little tiny pieces. So this one is the 6.5 by 12.5. We have some like a 4.5 by 12.5, but something like this. And then also a 6.5-inch square ruler. There are many times you're going to be measuring to check that things are square. And this is a bias square. It has a diagonal, but it has the white side are your even measurements and the black side is your 1/2 inch measurements, which makes cutting all these things super easy. So that's it for the cutting. So next the next video will be how we're gonna put it all together.